unfortunately, this president and this administration does not have a strategy to defeat ISIS. And so the fighting will go on. There's recently a story in the New York Times that maybe some of the intelligence information has been slanted in order to make things look better than they actually do. But the other aspect of it is, finally, before I leave the ISIS issue, is that if suppose right now about 2,000 young men and a few young women are going into Iraq and Syria, mostly European, but from all over the world, from as far away as Australia. Suppose that only 1% of that 2,000 a month that is flowing into into Iraq and Syria leave and want to commit an attack on the United States of America. Well, my friends, that's a lot of people. And I'm sure you noticed we even had an arrest here in Arizona just the other day. And all of us celebrated, and we're so proud of our Americans that disarmed that guy on the train. And we can't be more proud of those individuals, those brave Americans. But also it raises the question that all of us should be asking, how did that guy get on that train with AK-47s loaded down with ammunition? How did that happen? Wouldn't it, in a way, just fortunate that we had those Americans there to disarm him? And what would have happened if we hadn't? So we've got those challenges as well. Let me just say a little bit about our economy. It's kind of stumbling along. In Arizona, it's starting to get better. We were hardest hit. We were one of 2 or 3 states that were hardest hit the 2008 collapse. We have been coming back. Southern Arizona is not doing nearly as well as the Valley is, and we need more trade with Mexico, and we need a highway called I-11 that would start at the Mexico border and come up through Tucson, Phoenix, Las Vegas, and over. We need to have a better situation as far as border control is concerned. And by the way, we can control our border, and we can do it with technology as well as through people. We developed technology in Iraq. General Petraeus developed technology in Iraq where you can not only detect people with a radar, but you can track them back to where they came from. So with drones and radars and additional people, we can control our border. It's not under control right now. But we also need to have the flow of goods and services back and forth between the United States, Arizona, and Mexico. I found out the other day that Mexico does more business with Arizona than it does with Spain. And the Mexican government views Arizona as a great place for them to do business. We are living in very interesting times. As far as the presidential campaign is concerned, I am be glad to answer any questions or comments you might have, but at the moment I'd like to have a Trump-free moment. But I'd also like to mention to you why I am optimistic about the future of this country. First of all, this country, the United States of America, for the first time, is now energy independent. We are now have this drop in the price of oil to a large degree because the United States of America, thanks to fracking, is now energy independent. Now, there's not many people in this room that remember the 1970s when OPEC, led by the Saudis, cut off the flow of oil, and people in Arizona were spending hours in gas lines waiting to fill up their gas tanks. That can't happen again. That can never happen again. We are free now of our dependency on Middle Eastern energy. Now, the world is not free, but the United States of America is. And if we do the right thing, we'll be exporting energy to countries. Particularly, I would hope that we could take the natural gas that's being flared up in the North Dakota oil fields and get it to Ukraine so that they can be independent of Vladimir Putin's oil supply. So that's a huge thing. And everybody in this room, including me, has saved money compared to a year ago when the price of a gallon of gas was at least twice what it is today. So average consumers have gotten more money in their pockets to spend on other things, including tickets on Southwest Airlines to Aruba or Cabo or wherever they want to go. But second of all is the fact that manufacturing jobs are now being created in the United States. Not at the number we want, but certainly a dramatic change. A lot of that has to do with technology. About 6 months ago, I went out to Scottsdale, Arizona, to the opening of a plant that makes windows. And the reason why I went there, I was invited. Main reason why I went is because it wasn't an American company. It was a Belgian company based in Brussels, Belgium. And I went, and it was the grand opening, and it wasn't a big deal. I think it was like 100 employees. But I met the woman who was the CEO, and I said to her, I said, why did you, a Belgian-based company, pick Scottsdale, Arizona? And she said, we looked over in the entire world, and we thought Scottsdale, Arizona was the best place for us to establish a facility, hire people, and it wasn't just because of the taxes, but because of the overall lifestyle. I'd like to mention the temperature was about 85 that day, but anyway, and so we have that attraction. Finally, my friends, the only other thing I want to mention, and I gave it to my associate, and that is this thing that we call the iPhone. This is an incredible change in everybody's lives and everybody's lifestyle. It is a way of getting information and knowledge, and therefore better equip people to meet the challenges of their lives than anything that's happened since the invention of the printing press. I mean, it is phenomenal what is going on. And it may be manufactured in China, but it was invented here. And every one of these changes, my wife makes me buy a new one every goddamn 6 months or so. Why, I do not know, but I am forced to, I guess to be socially acceptable, I don't know. They may be made in China, but all of it comes from here in the United States. Every one of these changes, it's dramatic. About 2 months ago, I went over to Venice, California. I don't usually hang out there and work out, and I went to a place that some of you, particularly younger ones, are very familiar with, called Snapchat. Snapchat? Okay, I walked into this place because I was going to do a town hall meeting and talk to the employees. Guy meets me at the door, T-shirt, Levi's, 25 years old. He's the CEO. The CEO. He just turned down $4 billion for his company. I went in and talked to these employees. There wasn't a one of them over age 30. If there was, they were probably social outcasts. But so it's really remarkable what is taking place. And I think we should be most proud, because only in America do we have this kind of environment where a young person can go to college, or even in many cases drop out of college and start this kind of information technology that is literally changing the world. So I am optimistic in the long run. In the short term, we are in greater danger than we've ever been since the end of World War II, and we need the leadership that will effectively address it. I want to thank all of you again, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be in Group A. Group A is my favorite place in America to be. Group D is not my favorite place, especially when I have to. Anyway, middle seats are fun. But so I thank all of you for being here and all the great work you do, and I'd like to respond to any questions or comments that you might have. Thank you very much. Thank you. By the way, we used to call it Group 1. Now we call it Group A, isn't that? Yeah, that's a huge change. You end up in the same middle seat. But questions or comments?
Senator?
Yes.
We met earlier. I'm Gary Clausen. Among other things, I'm also an A4 driver.
Thank you. And your landings match the number of takeoffs, unlike me. Yeah.
This is more two thank yous rather than questions. First off, as a naval aviator, I'm glad to see you're stepping into the breach one more time. We need your leadership.
Thank you.
Secondly, I'm a Brophy grad. Your family, and you in particular, have been very kind to my alma mater. Thank you, sir.
In fact, we've almost gone broke. They have, you know, the thing, I love Catholics. I love Catholics. They have the best way of squeezing money out of you than yeah, it's a wonderful school. It really is. And thanks for serving. And for those of you that don't know, the A4 Skyhawk was a wonderful little airplane that was around for many, many years, probably one of the longest of any, because it was such an excellent air-to-ground aircraft, and a lot of us really enjoyed flying it. I flew other airplanes, as you probably did, but the little A4 was most fun of any. Any other questions or comments? Yes?
Wondering if you could comment on the growing movement that seems to be centered here in Arizona with a man named John McCain. I don't know if you've heard of him, but it's a movement that's growing, that's launching a global fight to end Islam, and they see no distinction between ISIS and your average citizen that's peaceful, and it's starting a lot of hate and a lot of animosity.
I am not familiar with that organization, but I will say unequivocally, without a doubt, that a religion of Islam and the Koran is an honorable and decent a religion that has many of the tenets that our Christian religion has. And as I said earlier before, this ISIS have taken an honorable religion and perverted it into a form of Islam that has nothing to do with the reality of what the religion and faith is all about. And you can ask any Muslim cleric and they will tell you the same thing. And that, frankly, is one of the horrible things about ISIS, is because they have taken an honorable religion and turned it into one of the most modern forms of evil that we have encountered in this world, certainly in my lifetime.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just wondering though, as the senator from Arizona, where this movement seems to be really.
Frankly, I think most citizens of Arizona and this country recognize that Islam is an honorable religion and one that we respect. So frankly, I think I keep up with everything that goes on. I had not heard of this movement, and I usually hear. Anyway, so thanks. Yeah, sir.
Thanks, sir. Chip Hancock with Southwest Pilots. Thank you for your service. I'm an Air Force pilot, so I want to keep us balanced here. But I appreciate that candid and sobering update on the world stage, and especially your leadership in the Senate during this tumultuous time. But I'm just curious on a different note. Chairman Schuster on the House side has proposed possibly the privatization or public-private partnership of aircraft control. Just curious to see how the Senate side is viewing that, or what you think about that.
The Senate side is not doing much, but in the past, I have seen public-private partnerships in some areas of the public sector, and it's usually worked out pretty well. And what usually is the best way to do it is some kind of pilot program to see how it works. Look, I'm glad I don't work at the FAA. I mean, it's bad enough having a 12% approval rating, members of Congress. Anybody here in the 12% that approves of Congress, please raise your hand. I'd like to know where the hell you've been. Anyway, by the way, I went through Sky Harbor Airport just the other day coming back, and a guy ran up to me and said, "Hey," he said, "anybody ever tell you look a lot like Senator John McCain?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Doesn't it sometimes make you mad as heck?" So anyway, I think where we can get the private sector into government bureaucracies that have the motivation that the private sector has is always a good idea. And by the way, you also know far better than I do, because you live with it every day. Modernization of the air traffic control system is an absolute must. If you believe that our economy is improving, and I do believe, all too slowly, but it's improving, then there's going to be more people that want to get on airliners and go around the country and the world, and we're going to have an overtaxed air traffic control system. And you can see examples of that from time to time, a breakdown in the system in the New York Center or one of those places. The other day we had on the East Coast the computer system broke down, and they were having to do it on paper, right? I don't know if you were involved in that, but it bollocksed up the whole East Coast for a number of hours. So we're going to have to keep up. And the interesting thing is, I'm sure that with our advances in computers all the time, that technology could dramatically improve not only air traffic control system, but aircraft themselves. So thank you for the question or comment. Yes, sir.
Yes, you mentioned the trade between Mexico and the U.S., and I believe Open Skies is up for a vote with the Mexican Senate here to possibly become effect January 2016. Just wondering if you can speak to that and potential impact between Phoenix and Mexico, if they may deregulate that even further.
If they deregulate the airline industry, you're going to see a huge jump in air traffic between the United States and Mexico. All of us here in this room have probably traveled at one time or another to some part of Mexico. Let's face it, Hispanic culture is part of Arizona. That's what we celebrate, whether it be the food, whether it be the music, whether it be all of the other aspects of the Hispanic culture that has enriched our state. Also, the fastest growing part of our population, obviously, is the Hispanic population. And all of us want to go back and forth to some of the really beautiful parts of Mexico, whether it be Cabo, where the weather is and the beaches is so wonderful, and also from other parts. So I see it as a step forward. The government of Mexico is very forward-leaning in a number of areas. There's been a recent scandal about the president's wife in a house that I'm not too familiar with, but overall they have done some real significant deregulation, including that of the telecommunications industry, which for the first time has opened it up for competition. I probably told you more than you ever wanted to hear, but I'm very optimistic about Mexico. But I can tell you, down at the port of Nogales, Mariposa Mariposa crossing, sometimes it takes 45 minutes to an hour to get across from one side of the border to the other. Over in Texas, Governor Perry, former governor, one of his priorities was improving those ports of entry, and a lot of that traffic now is headed towards the Texas border rather than the Arizona-Mexico border, and it makes a lot more sense to go across the Arizona border because California is one of the major destinations for all these goods and services. Our future, in my view, is inextricably tied in many respects, particularly our economy, to a large degree, on our relations with Mexico. And we should be proud of that. Any more? Yes, sir.
Sir, my name is Jay Paulus. As a former Air Force officer, first of all, thank you for your service in the Navy, in Hanoi, and your service in the Congress of the U.S. One of my concerns is the sequestration of the defense budget. Is there any near-term remedy to that, or are we just going to have to wait till a new administration, or what are your views on that?
America, I'm a very proud Republican. Republicans are just as guilty as Democrats on sequestration. It is decimating our military, our Chief of Staff of the United States Army, who retired last week, made some very dire statements about our ability to defend the nation. It's a meat axe, and it's disgraceful, and it's unacceptable. And unless we repeal it, we're not going to, in these most dangerous times, if you accept the words of those people as I start out my remarks, we're not going to be capable of adequately defending the nation. What does that mean? Does it mean we're going to get beat by somebody? No, but it means it will make it a lot harder to defeat an enemy. History is replete of the United States of America not being ready to fight. After World War II, the Korean War broke out, and it was a massacre at first, because we weren't ready to fight. After Vietnam, we were not ready to fight, and we are not now in some respects. So my highest priority, frankly, is to get rid of sequestration. And finally, at the same time, we've got to eliminate this waste and cost overruns that characterize our defense acquisition system, which many times embarrasses me, that we have these very terrible cost overruns. Listen, if Southwest Airlines ran on the same basis the Pentagon, you'd be out of business day after tomorrow, I promise you. And so we've got to fix that part of it as well. Yes, another question.
Another question. Recently, you've called the videos that came out about Planned Parenthood deplorable and disgusting, and that they show this horrible underside. Wondering if you could comment, though, on the independent forensic report that came out last week that said even the unedited videos have been edited at least 42 times, and you cannot make any determinations about what they actually say,
Well,
and that they wouldn't be admittable in a court of law.
I don't know who the outfit is that made that assessment, but I saw the videos myself. Please, give me a break. I mean, when a person is making some of the comments that are clearly there on the videos, no matter how they were edited, they're still disgraceful in my view. Sir.
Thank you for your service and thank you for being here, Senator. My question is in regard to Cuba. So the airline industry is closely monitoring developments. People are excited about the prospect to travel to Cuba. Some of our competitors have already announced that they intend to serve the market. What are some of the deeper ramifications associated with normalizing relations with Cuba from your perspective?
Well, I'm reminded of the words of Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, who once said the capitalists are going to hang themselves and we'll sell them the rope to do it. There has been no reform that I know of in the Cuban government. There has been no relaxation of their human rights abuses. There has been no change. All that money that you're talking about, what does it go into? Government-owned industries. It's the government. It's Fidel Castro and Raul that are making all the money. And the human rights situation is still, in my view, unacceptable in Cuba. And let me just contrast that for you. I supported the normalization of relations with Vietnam, but we went through a long, many-year process working in a bipartisan basis. I worked with President Clinton, and we demanded certain things from them. Empty out the re-education camps, stop a lot of the human rights abuses, a full accounting of those who are missing in action. There was a long list, laundry list, that we negotiated with them for 5 years. And then when we decided to normalize relations, President Clinton and I and John Kerry and others on a bipartisan basis stood and said, we're going to normalize relations. And it's been a success. What did this president do? He announced one day. He announced one day that we're going to have normal relations with Cuba. No changes in their human rights activities, no changes in the way their society is governed, and without any taint of bipartisanship or effort to reach out to our side to see if there weren't ways that we could work together on an issue of this significance. So all I can say is that they're not going to get the money from this Congress to open an embassy, I'll tell you that. And they shouldn't, in my view. So could I just say that I'm really happy to be here at Southwest, and could I also say that one of the things about riding in Southwest is you always have flight attendants who try to be amusing and entertaining, as you know. They aren't always, but they try, right? Some sing, some, others. So I guess I could end up by mentioning to you that in politics, which is not always fun, you try to entertain and you try to make people laugh, and sometimes that's with ethnic jokes. But there's only one ethnic joke that is allowed in American politics, and that is Irish jokes. It is not allowed to tell a Polish joke or an Italian joke or any other, only Irish jokes. And I have never known the reason for that, but that is political reality. So this story concerns a bar in Boston, Massachusetts, and there's one guy down at either end of the bar. The bar is empty. The guy walks down, sits down, the guy next to him at the bar and says, "Hey, where are you from?" He said, "I'm from Ireland." He says, "Really?" He said, well, let me buy you a drink. He said, well, okay, I'll buy you a drink. I'll buy you a drink. So they're buying each other drinks back and forth. The guy says, where are you from in Ireland? He says, I'm from Galway. He said, I'm from Galway. Really? And so back and forth. And the guy said, where'd you go to high school? He said, I went to St. Mary's. He said, you couldn't have gone there. I went to St. Mary's. Well, let me buy you a drink. No, back and forth. The guy walks in the bar and sees all the commotion down at the end of the bar and says to the bartender, so, what's going on down there? And the bartender said, it's just the O'Reilly twins getting drunk again. Thank you very much for having me.
And we're going to transition back to